wondered how to grow a successful property management business while still making time for the things you love? Welcome to STR Booked, the podcast that unlocks the secrets of short-term rental success. I'm your host, Nihal Salah, and today we're joined by Andy Newman, founder and CEO of Newman Hospitality. Andy's story is unique. After 28 years in finance, he transitioned into the short-term rental industry, creating a business that not only thrived, but allowed him to maintain a very healthy work-life balance. We'll explore how Andy's attention to detail, from thoughtful staging to tech-driven management, has fueled his company's rapid growth while giving him the freedom to enjoy his passions. Let's dive straight in. So hi, Andy, and welcome to STR Booked. I'm really excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Nihal. Very happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
Oh, there's a lot that I want to talk to you about because, as I said before we started recording, I've been listening to some of your previous interviews, and there's so much that I'm really excited to be sharing with listeners about your experience and your journey. On that note, tell us about what, your background and what inspired you to leave a successful career in finance to set up a property management business.
Yeah, I was in finance for a long time and I was successful and making really good money, but I was increasingly less passionate about what I was doing. And I'm a strong believer that it's not enough to like something, to do well at it and to make money. There's more to it. And I was increasingly passionate about coaching, and you couldn't really life coach, career coaching, executive coaching within a bank because it's a little bit taboo. It's very complex, conflicts of interest, understandable. So I thought I needed more independence. My first step was to create my own independent company. And when I worked in banks, I had to stay in top hotels, big sacrifice. But once I was independent, I was free to choose. And the top hotels were interesting. They were also boring, and they were very expensive. So I started to look for alternatives. And in doing so, I ran into this company that was mainly in New York City, or known in New York City. And I was very intrigued by the concept. It really hit a nerve quickly. It was Airbnb, as you might be guessing, not very well known back then. But I always had this travel bug in me. More than just traveling, it was experiencing different cultures. It was the challenge of being a stranger and adapting to something new and just being in an uncertain environment. I just love that. And I experienced it growing up with my family, having two cultures and two religions and multiple languages and many accents. And I thought, how cool to be able to continue to experience that, not having that end after college. I did a junior year abroad in France. Airbnb comes in and I'm like, wow, this is what I've been waiting for 20 years. So I started using Airbnb, and I actually was pretty adventurous. I didn't just stay in a whole place. I really looked to stay in people's places. So I would get to know the locals. That's how it started. And I had an aunt who was actually, I like to call her the Airbnb founder. Well, why do I say that? Because in the 1970s and 80s, she used to have this rent stabilized, beautiful apartment in front of Lincoln Center. And she traveled a lot. And whenever she traveled, she would rent it. And she would have these connections in South America, and everyone knew. And when I traveled somewhere, she was like, oh, I need you to bring some money for me. A guest is going to be staying. So I would get the money and the guest would stay. So it was Airbnb without technology, without what we know today. And she loved hospitality. Her husband had passed away. So I said to her, listen, she was in Naples, highly desirable destination. I said, look, you can continue to travel, spend time with your sister. I'll do it for free. I'll learn how this is done. I'll host your place. It wasn't co-hosting. I entirely took it. And I started doing that. And friends and family started coming up to me and said, hey, I have a place in Morocco, in Mirlef, this little town on the cliffs of in Morocco. And then a friend of mine had this place in south of France. So I ended up with this first portfolio of beautiful homes, difficult to manage, but exciting culturally. and great learning experience. And that's how I got started, doing it for family and friends for free, low risk, because I really wasn't putting any capital. It was just, as they call it, sweat equity. And after about a couple of years, I knew that this was a concept. I stayed in New York City in a brownstone. The host had 4 or 5 apartments in the same building. He would run off during daytime, teach at Columbia University, come back at night, change real quickly, put on his house cleaning uniform, clean the apartments, and I was like, this is great, and so at some point I decided, all right, this is a path. I'm going to be moving in this direction. But by the way, I never quit finance. I There was a time in 2015 where I had a finance company, where I was a coach, and I was doing this Airbnb hosting. It was exciting and messy.
It sounds super, super exciting. And I can feel the passion as you talk. I absolutely love that. And I agree with you that, what you said at the beginning there is you have to have the passion for it. And I actually think these days, because there's so much competition, guests expect so much more. I think it must be hard to consistently meet those guests' expectations if you don't have that level of passion for the business you're in, right?
Absolutely. And when people ask me all the time, and the big question that comes up is, do I do it myself or do I get a manager? And my single word is passion. If you don't have the passion, get a manager. Get a manager, because there's one huge difference between money management and property management. If you were asking me about money management, I would say, Nihal, you can do it yourself. All you need to do is push 2 buttons, buy this thing called, if you're in America, called the S&P, an ETF, and you're going to outperform 80% of the geniuses and experts for a fraction of the cost.
Mm.
No work involved. Now, switch over to property management. There's no one single button that you can push. It is work, and it is details, and it is technology, and it is experiences, and everything has a process.
Mm.
So self-managing is good for those people that are passionate about hospitality, have a lot of time on their plates.
So, how many properties do you have at the moment, Andy?
Yeah, right now we have about 150 properties, and
Okay.
we went from being all over the world to being only in America. It's really the story of the alchemist. You're always looking for that treasure somewhere, and that house that looks beautiful in Morocco and in France. Well, the simple townhome in Virginia produced a lot more money than this beautiful villa in France. And so the best market to me is the U.S. We know it. We're here. Having said that, though, we're in 3 different states, and
Yeah.
I'll go into why we do that at some point during our talk, I hope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm really curious to know involved you are in the business in terms of the operational side of things. And the reason I asked that question is because, like, we were chatting before we hit record. I was listening to some of your previous interviews where you talk about a level of detail in the properties that I haven't heard other property managers and owners talk about. So I'm really keen to understand. I want us to talk about mattress consultants and explain to our listeners what a mattress consultant is, because before hearing you talk about that on another interview, I had never heard the term. And also some of these details that you pay attention to, and you as a business owner, like how involved or uninvolved are you in kind of that operational side of things?
Yeah, I've worked a lot to cultivate free time, and I think it is one of the most underestimated superpowers, or one of the most underestimated components of being healthy and being productive. I mean, I'm convinced, and I like reading about neuroscience. Increasingly, we learn that play is very productive. The play is very, very, very productive, and I'm shocked when I look at my portfolio. I mean, you and I are both kiteboarders. Um, I have about 30% of my business has come directly or indirectly from spending time on the water. And it's not like I decided to go kiteboarding like a lot of people do with golf, because They're there to network and to be with the right people and to talk business. No, I go kiteboarding to be on the water because I love it. I love what happens when you're just inches from the water, feeling, touching every wave, taking your hand out and just caressing the wake, etc. So, but there's something in you that changes when you're doing that. That becomes extremely attractive, shall I say, energetically, and people want to talk to you. And people come up to you and say, "Hey, you told me that you do these Airbnbs and on the beach. Can you come to my house tonight? Because I'm thinking about converting my place." So time off has just great components. Number one, you said it. This job, this path has so many details, from obsessing about reviews and getting all wrapped up in reviews, and to maintenance issues and crises and owners complaining about maybe not generating enough revenues. You need to be able to fully and completely disconnect. And when you do that, you build surprising and amazing relationships that lead to friendship and business. But also, when I disconnect, I mean, I've gotten some of my best ideas from staying in the middle of nowhere. I mean, really, really nowhere. I'm talking about the Altai Mountains in Mongolia, where as far as you can see, you see nothing. You are surrounded by 40 million grazing animals because it's one of the last nomadic cultures on the planet. And yet, when you stay in one of those yurts, when you are hosted by the locals, you learn new turns and twists and new aspects of hospitality that you couldn't even imagine. So, traveling and going to these places, it really nourishes your creativity, renews your creativity. So it just serves so many purposes. And here's another key thing about this travel and disconnect aspect. It forces you to think about your business differently. In other words, where does your company, where does your team need to be so that I can fully disconnect and know that my business is not going to fall apart? So, from whatever angle, it's something nice to look forward to. I mean, don't get me wrong, this doesn't happen overnight. And there, that there's a lot of people out there that say, "Oh, go into this Airbnb business, hire 10 virtual assistants in the Philippines, go sip pina coladas in Tulum, and the business just happens." Not true. You know, that little myth is not true. You
Yeah.
start by putting the hours and doing the work, making the mistakes, but you have to have that vision, I think, of building that team. And it's funny. When I worked in finance, I really had a few brilliant assistants, but I always said, "I'm not going to hire people. That's too complex. That's too complicated. I already struggle enough with one or two people, and here I am with 22 people and fully, completely loving it, loving, the interactions, the coaching, the issues that come up." Um, but that's what you want to look forward to, because that is really how you can get a life back. You can have a business. So they're not incompatible. You can have the cake and eat it too. You can
Mm.
have the business and you can have the life that you dream about.
But what about, okay, because I completely agree with you and I completely get that it takes time. It's definitely not overnight. But what do you say to the business owner who is trying to grow their property management business and they feel like they're stuck on this hamster wheel and they just can't seem to get off of it to start to work on rather than just in their business? What is that first step that they need to take, even though it's not overnight? But what do they need to do just to stop the hamster wheel without feeling like, oh my God, if I get off of this, then, something, the toilets aren't going to work in this property, or there's going to be an issue with the cleaning here. I have to do it all myself. How do they get off the hamster wheel?
I think it's really important to set the stage and to spend a lot of time setting the stage. So when I went into both coaching and later on into property management, unlike a lot of my colleagues, as I did pretty well in my business, I didn't switch homes every year, a bigger, and whatever home, so that everything, all your expenses are only rising and rising and rising, and more gadgets that you don't really need, etc. So I had at least certain amount of leeway that I knew that I could burn, let's call it burn cash, and not fall off a cliff. So that is really, really, really important, because going into something with that energy of hyper intending, of having that tension, what you end up creating is a lot of resistance. And when you push back, the universe just pushes right back on you. And all you start getting is a feeling of increasing overwhelm, and every little problem looks overwhelming. So I think you need to bring in a playful, free energy of not being so attached to the result. And you do that possibly by experimenting, by trying, and not needing to live from it. I think that's really key. Now, I have some people, and I kind of suspected it was going to be the case. Absolutely no resentment about it. In a way, they say that copying is the best form of flattery. But I had some people that hired me, for example, in Indiana. My first home in Indiana was somebody that I hired for renovations, and his son lived in Indiana. He hired me to manage his home in Indiana. Well, a year later, he fired me because our results were great, but because he wanted to do it himself. In other words, he hired me basically to learn, or to teach his daughter to see exactly what we did. And that was fine. We got a lot, frankly, because we were able to experiment in an area that did very well. And from that, we decided to open up a territory in Indiana. So I'm very grateful to him, and I still hire him to do renovations. So that is really, a way of doing it. He was smart. He said, no, let me just hire this manager. I trust him. I know him. And you're looking at the technology, you're looking at how responses are crafted, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that is one way of doing it. Doing it, if you don't have the time and you have a job, work with the manager to first learn. And that happened to us twice, actually, once in Virginia as well. And that somebody hired us and then took over the management. So that seems to be a good way. But I'll tell you one way not to do it. One way that's really popular and that's been highly hyped in our world of YouTube, et cetera. Master leases. I mean, that word sounds so sophisticated, and rent arbitrage. Um, this whole rent arbitrage thing, the numbers just don't add up. Especially if you're doing rent arbitrage with a manager. There's not enough to go around to pay the rent, the utilities, and the manager. There's just not enough left. And let me tell you a little anecdote. We had a house that got sold. And the new buyer, I was prospecting the new buyer. Hey, let me manage it for you. He was a smart businessman, really smart guy. And he ended up convincing me, no, you rent the house for me, and you manage it. Well, guess what? We're 2 months into it, and I'm still down $6,000. It is low season. I'm down $6,000, and I don't pay myself management fees on that house. So imagine if on top of the $6,000, I would have paid whatever, $1,500 in management fee. So that is not one good way of doing it. Do it the old-fashioned Airbnb way. Start potentially with a room and get a taste for the issues, for hospitality, for writing the reviews, for managing the software. And start simple. Maybe you want to start, if you want to, start simple. So start maybe with just Airbnb. Why Airbnb? Because they have the best software. Got to give it to them. They do have the most pleasant software interface. Number two, well, yeah, they'll book you more than anyone else, at least in the States, by far. And I say that, kind of like it's tricky too, double-edged sword, because you're at the same time, very vulnerable. They can turn you off, and they do. Don't think that it's a remote thing. They can turn you off, and sometimes for reasons that you can't control.
Okay, super. I want to go back to the point around mattress consultants.
Yeah,
I've been
it's
dying
funny.
to speak to you about
Sure.
this.
It's funny that you say that. Let me demystify it in one way. I actually
And give
invented that.
listeners some,
Yeah.
and give listeners, Andy, sorry, some context, because
Sure.
or actually, you
Perfect.
know what, I'll just to give them the 15-second version. I listened to you on an interview on YouTube talking about short-term rentals in Miami, and you talked about having mattress consultants to make sure that you have the best mattresses for your guests. And I just thought, oh my God, I have never had anyone talk about mattress consultants. I need to ask Andy about mattress consultants and why you care about that level of detail and how important it is for your guest satisfaction. Over to you.
Cool. Yeah. It's funny while you're asking me, I'm actually, my mind is going back and stitching things together to remember exactly the initial seed of where that started. Well, that initial seed started with kiteboarding. Why? Because one of my first and best clients and good buddies, he is a fanatic environmentalist. And today I think that's a good thing. We all need to be fanatic environmentalists. But he said to me when I was preparing his home, he said, Andy, it has to be an organic mattress. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Organic mattress? A mattress is a mattress is a mattress. That, up to that point, a bed was an afterthought. It was, Amazon, check the thing, bed, cheapest, dot, 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 dot. You didn't just think about it. It was an afterthought. Well, when he said that, he also said, well, listen, call this guy that has a store in Coral Gables. And I got to know him, talk to him. He was just so professional. He wasn't a salesman. He knew what he was talking about. And I called him from there on my mattress consultant. And, when you're talking to owners, it sounds much more interesting to say, we use my mattress consultant than to say, I know of this store in Coral Gables, right? So that's the secret to the mattress consultant.
Love
Never
it.
thought about it. But, from that moment up, and he grew and he opened up 3 or 4 or 5 different stores, but he really is more than just a salesman. And he doesn't sell you the Casper mattress that is 95% advertising, 5% mattress, right? That's not the route you want to go on. You want a mattress that is 5% advertising, 95% mattress, and that you spend much less money on. But you can't buy the $200 Amazon, and you can't buy the you can't buy the $3,000 brand mattress. It's absurd. You don't want to do that. But that's how the mattress consultant came. Now we've gone much further with it because here is what we discovered, I'm going to actually at one point do a podcast that I'm going to call the anatomy of the bed, because really too many people focus on these fancy things and these fancy amenities, expensive to show off, but they forget the basics. And I tell prospective owners, we need a hotel quality bed. You don't want to go into a short-term rental that the bed is 2 inches off the ground, makes it look like a dorm, that hardly maybe doesn't even have a bed frame, right? You don't A decorator once said to me, "Okay, Andy, we need a bed skirt." Just like my organic bed skirt. What are you talking about? And at the beginning, I'm like, "That's weird." Okay, I'll defer to the expert. She says a bed skirt, a bed skirt. And then I realized, yeah, why? Also because people buy these super cheap, metallic looking bed frames. You go into a home and that looks skimpy. It looks cheap. It looks plain, right? So you can camouflage it. You can hide it with a bed skirt. But better yet, what I have learned is, Nihal, something that happens constantly?
Mm.
Bed frames fall apart because people buy these cheap bed frames that are $200. They have the $200 mattress, the $200 bed frame, and these bed frames just fall apart. Now, it's very foolish savings because when a bed frame falls apart, you are in crisis mode. You need to buy one and buy one quickly, or repair it, and the repair never works. So
Mm.
2 days, 2 nights later, it will fall apart again. And then you have to buy it quickly, but it doesn't stop there. You have to compensate. or maybe you have a cancellation. So before you know it, you could have well over $1,000. So do the right thing first. Buy a great bed frame. And that is something that we're really, really pushing to clients. You buy a good bed frame, you buy a good mattress. Now, a good bed frame, among other things, protects the mattress. If you're buying a cheap bed frame, these slats open up, and guess what happens? The mattress goes the beginning of the end for your mattress. If you buy a good mattress, protect it. How? Get a good mattress protector, waterproof and washable, and that doesn't overheat, which is one big issue. Next, you want decent sheets. Now, there's a big myth about thread count. That is a myth. You can have terrible sheets with high thread count, and you can have really good sheets with relatively low thread count. I won't go into the details, but I'll just leave it at that. Get good sheets. They have to be white. Get good pillows. If you have a queen or a king size bed, and I'll say another thing, in America at least, Europe is different, but in America, you can never go wrong with a king size bed. Now, please don't get a king size bed that then you can't fit a nightstand, a table, right? I mean, come on, or that you can hardly crawl in the room because you have a king size bed. Be reasonable. If you have the room and you can get a king size bed, because you will never lose a guest because of a king size bed. You will lose a guest. You might lose a guest if you have a queen size, and if it's smaller, you'll lose even more opportunities. Next, pillows. We talked about that a minute ago. If you have a big bed, you need 4 pillows. Why? Because you want different texture of pillows. And by the way, don't get the great mattress and then spend pennies on pillows. No, it's such a turnoff to get this pillow that's like this, nothing, right? You grab it and it disappears, and the pillow has to have texture, and you know what I mean. It's got to be a decent a decent
I know,
pillow.
I know what you mean, because as you're talking, I'm remembering, I was telling you before we started recording that I probably stay at around a dozen short-term rentals every year, give or take. And I was at one a couple of weeks ago. And as soon as I walked in the bedroom, I looked and I'm like, oh, that looks like a nice bed. Because for me, like the bed will make it or break it. I need a good night's sleep. And when I got into this bed, Andy, it was just like the bed was hugging me. It was the nicest bed. The pillows, exactly like you said, there was some with feathers, but then there was some that were a little bit harder. And there were 4 pillows. I think maybe it was a king size bed. It was just me, but it was lovely having so much space, having all of these pillows, and I had the most amazing night's sleep. And also the duvet wasn't too heavy and wasn't too light. I just felt like it was the perfect temperature. It was gorgeous bed. I loved it. Wonderful night. And the one I'm staying at the moment, you can tell it's not, that the owner hasn't put as much passion into it. It's just a bed. It's just a
Mm,
bed, and it's
yeah.
just
And
a
you said
pillow.
something key. You said something absolutely key. You said it looked beautiful. You know what? That is really important. Just like when you go to a good restaurant, it can be a great meal, but if it's not presented right, in your brain, something is like, hmm. And then they're fighting. That restaurant is already fighting an uphill battle. And it's the same thing with a bed. And when you go to a good hotel, right away, it's that bed it's inviting. It looks good. Somehow, the way the sheets are ironed and the way the pillows are set up. And by the way, I mean this might be a girl guy thing, but one thing that bothers me a little bit. I mean, don't put 50 little cushions. What do they call it? The pillow.
Oh,
Please help me with that.
I don't know, throw pillows,
The throw
cushion.
pillow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, 2 or 3 is enough. You don't have to put 50 of them. I mean, where do you put these things after? Anyway, a little pet peeve about beds, my opinion. But yeah, you do want to decorate a bit. Yes, you can put colors, but the sheets should be white. The duvet covers should be white. A little, throw at the end. It's nice. It adds a touch. It adds a texture. So, but really do put some time and effort into, and guests will really, really appreciate it. I would say if you have to spend time and money on that at the expense of making the home more minimalist, that's okay. rather than having a maximalist home and a terrible bed. Go to minimalist but great bed if you have to, and if financial resources are an issue.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I did not expect that we'd spend so much time talking about beds, but I think that detail is so helpful for listeners because really a bad night's sleep can ruin a holiday. It really, really can. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I ended up going and buying a pillow for the rental that I'm in at the moment because I just could. I was getting neck pain from the pillow on the bed because also the mattress is a bit too soft for my liking. But I've ended up going out and just buying my own pillow because I need a good night's sleep. So so yeah,
Well, now
yeah,
that you say that, we find we bump into guests that travel with their pillows. Hmm. So it is quite important for some people.
yeah. No,
And
100%. I do.
yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's also the hygiene around pillows. I said mattress cover. Please, please, pillow covers. I mean, there's a lot that goes on. You're sleeping on this thing. Some people are like drooling a little bit on. I mean, you want to protect that pillow too. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why some people will travel with pillows. You want to also, and there's some people that are very detail oriented about this, and they specifically will look at that. That is a huge turnoff for some people. A pillow that only has the the sheet or the pillow
The
cover. No, it
pillowcase.
needs the
Yeah.
pillow cover, the case, but it also needs the pillow protector. Really important.
I've never heard of pillow protectors. I didn't know those were a
Yeah.
thing. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, of course. Because I actually never peek underneath the pillowcases. I suppose I'm scared of what I might find.
Yeah, because a lot of the good sheets have this kind of like the pocket, so it turns a little bit over, right? So you
Yeah.
can't really tell if it has it or it doesn't have it. Just like people can't tell if your mattress has a mattress protector unless you really just pull out that fitted sheet.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And I'll
Well,
say one last thing about.
yeah, go
Go ahead.
for it,
Sorry.
please.
I'll say one more thing about amenities in general. People ask me, and here's the way I look at it. And I always like to look at things that are completely unrelated. Take cars. What do car companies do? They do constant little tweaks to the vehicles every year. Tweak, 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 tweak. Refresh it. Technology, this, that. Maybe change change little things. But every 6 years, that car is going to look entirely different. There's just a new version of the vehicle practically. And that's how they can keep it fresh and alive. Well, when people ask me about a home, I believe that a home is a living, breathing, growing, evolving organism. And you need to constantly, it's not like nothing, 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 boom, nothing, boom. No, it's constant. And I tell my owners, I tell them, look, I am also an owner. I will tell you everything I do. And I'll tell you because if you don't do what I'm doing, well, you might lose some business potentially to me, right? And I am constantly taking the temperature and the pulse of that home, of the people, of the market. So my response to amenities is you always want to be evolving. There's a character, there's a culture, and COVID came. You asked me about COVID, the nomadic culture. Well, then you have to have more of a focus on that workspace. So we provide printers. I mean, printers cost virtually nothing, but it's such a nice convenience to have. Some people really do like to print their itinerary, not just on the phone. If the phone fails, you're in deep trouble. So some people really appreciate having a printer. So I believe that you need to always be tweaking. And yes, maybe every 6 years you do a major one. You renovate a kitchen. You do something important. And don't always look at it as an expense. These are often improvements. And I can tell you this, the owners that didn't follow me, and sometimes they had a better home, a more expensive home, but I had a much better ADR, average daily rate,
Yeah.
than they did. It really does affect the bottom line.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I love the analogy of the car, making those little tweaks regularly, but then doing that complete overhaul. And it is an investment because you will see those returns if you do that. And I think it's kind of one of those things that if you don't make those improvements on a regular basis, it's almost like suddenly you turn around and the property has just been neglected. Then you start getting those bad reviews, and then it goes downhill from there.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. One of
yeah,
the
that's
things that
true.
you've talked about in other interviews was having what you refer to as an Instagrammable feature in the house. Tell us more
Yeah,
about what you mean by that.
yeah. I people nowadays really focus on sharing their experience. That's a big part of traveling, and that means that you want to think about the how well you want to think about photogenic opportunities in your house. So, for example, let me go back again to my house. My house had a pool screen, which you would think a pool screen really important to have from a manager standpoint. It saves us a lot of maintenance issues. But I had a really old pool screen. What did that mean? That it was very claustrophobic. It just went right off the extended roof of the house. So frankly, it felt like a cage. But just beyond the pool screen, what did I have? I had a lake, a beautiful lake. So that pool screen was neutralizing a beautiful view. And it was just limited. So I ripped it out. I took it out completely to create those Instagrammable opportunities that people can then share. And that is why Instagram is important, because you convert your guests into advocates of your home, into free advertising of your home. They're sharing this, and guess what? Their friends are going to come back. Hey, send me the link to that house. I think I want to go there. And guess what? They're going to go there and they want to take the exact same picture
Yeah.
to share with their friends.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. I want to talk to you a little bit about how you've grown your business over the past, it's been more than a decade now, about 9, 10 years, has it been?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
what's kind of been your strategy behind expanding?
So my strategy initially was, as I said, the friends and family, and then we transitioned into management mandates officially and getting paid. That was step one. I had, as you know, the finance business, and when I talked about investment portfolios, these were clients that had been with me sometimes north of 20 years. So I share everything with them, and I told them about this Airbnb concept. And then they started looking at me, and I told them, "Look, I'm doing this with my homes," and they said, "Andy, why aren't you inviting me to this opportunity?" And it suddenly clicked in my mind that instead of investing in this XYZ hedge fund that was totally cold and impersonal, and you would never know what the return was going to be year over year. You'd hope it was good based on past performance, but you know what they say: past performance is no indication of future return. Blah blah blah. So anyway, that was sort of a light bulb that said, "Wait a moment, this is another investment opportunity for my investment clients," and I decided to start offering this to my closest investment clients. And it really became one of my niches to really offer this as an investment before really it got popular. I mean, most of the people that were getting into this space were people that were renting their room or were renting one property, but it wasn't being really promoted as an alternative investment, as an investment opportunity. So that's when we started doing that. And that was another key growth phase. And then after that, we started doing some of the digital marketing. And you know, here's what's really interesting though. I told you earlier about how playing and taking time off leads to clients. That worked really well. But you know, here's what's fascinating though, and this is why I also like Airbnb so much. As much as you know, there's some issues, and they all take a big commission, etc. A lot of our clients found us on Airbnb. Why? Because you're looking for a manager in a certain area. And what is one of the best ways to look for a manager? Look for a home first. Look for a home that you really like. Look for the reviews of that home. You find 4 homes. One of them has just outstanding reviews. And what is an outstanding review? I would say that a key component of an outstanding review is a review that talks about the home, the location, and the manager. If the review only talks about the home, great home, large, da da da, and makes no mention of the manager, it means that the manager was average. They covered the bases, but there was no heart, there was no connection, there was no the so-called above and beyond. So I was pleasantly surprised when people were finding us on Airbnb, and we got some of our best clients because we always ask them, how did you find us? They would find us on Airbnb. But there was really no magic pill. For a while, and I would say something else. Growth is not an arithmetic formula. You don't just grow like this. No, growth can be like this, nothing, nothing, and then boop, and then it flattens out. And then let me just put it this way. There are certain tipping points with growth. So that it was so hard to break through 10. And then it was so hard to break through 50. But it used to take us maybe a year to get 5 properties. And now we might get 5 properties in 1 month.
Yeah.
Right. So you need persistence, and you need a certain amount of persistent, discipline, focus. But, I'll say something else. We talk so much about technology, and digital and blah, blah, blah. Man, old fashioned relationships and connections. We've talked about kiteboarding. I also bike and just, yeah, the people that you meet, that is just so much more powerful. And I say to my team all the time, I mean, my son, my son just referred us our best business opportunity. Huge. I mean, that's going to a business opportunity that in a second that cost us almost nothing to onboard. Well, no, it did cost us, but you know what I mean. I didn't have to spend on digital advertising,
Yeah,
etc.
there's like very low cost of acquisition.
Right.
Yeah.
So I use that to tell people in my teams to say to them, look, never underestimate the power of just networking, of spending maybe it's 2 hours a week doing something that you love with people that you like, and opportunities will come up when you're not looking for them necessarily.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is how this happened. And it was, it's going to be a huge piece of business for us. And it came from my son, who doesn't even work. That son doesn't even work in my company. So I think that you need to do all of those things, and if you do them, um, you will definitely grow. If you're asking your clients for referrals, and what do I say to some of my owners? I say, help wanted, help us help you, because here's the deal: we can spend a lot of money and time and effort getting that additional home, or you can bring us a like-minded owner who we're instantly going to like, and instead of spending that money in some advertising agency, instead of spending that time, we get to spend it more in your home, and we get to spend it more in partnership with you. That if you have a difficult month, we can help you out. We can help cover some expenses. So, and that's a key concept. And that's really, a client once said this to me, and it meant so much. And that was another light bulb. He said, Andy, we did a performance review with him. He said, Andy, what I like about you guys is that I feel a sense of partnership. I feel that when things happen, you step up to the plate and you help us out. You help me out. And that stuck. And that's really a direction that we always want to go in with our owners, creating a sense of partnership.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about relationships and how important they are, because I had a conversation recently with someone who has a property management business in the US as well, very, very successful. And he talked extensively about how he builds relationships with the owners of the properties he manages, how he'll just randomly call them, especially, like if one of them is in a region where there's been a hurricane or some kind of disaster, or he knows that a family member hasn't been well or whatever, he'll just pick up the phone and just check in. And it means so much to them. And just going out of his way just to build those relationships with the intention of without necessarily the intention of I'm going to get something back, like you said,
Right.
but just genuinely going out and networking and building those relationships with people. It really does pay off in the long run in ways that you never expect. It's just one of those things. I think you really hit the nail on the head there, because I do think that many property managers and business owners in the STR space get really hyper fixated on the tools and the tech and the tactics and whatnot, but it's hospitality. It's about
Yeah.
relationships at its core. And I really do believe, after having spoken to so many people in such a short period of time, because I don't come from an STR background, and being, someone who travels and stays in so many short-term rentals, is it makes a huge difference to the guests when you feel that the people who own and run the properties that you're staying in actually care. And I always go back to the same properties, because lots of people say that, oh no, guests don't return on holiday to the same properties. I go back to the same properties a lot. So I think it makes a huge difference. I always remember the property managers and the owners who make it a point to connect with me in person, whether that's just a text message, a phone call, or actually coming up and saying hello. And the ones who go out their way to just think of those extra touches, I think it makes a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, and you make a good point about that personal connection, which is getting more rare because of technology. And I can't imagine running this business without having these the self code, the lock, and the self entry, right? Because I
Yeah.
think it's for efficiency and security. It's important. But recently, I've seen that when somebody shows up and somebody says hello, and I almost bought a company in New Mexico where the owner does exactly that. The owner, she actually meets every single guest. And something that was really cool about that was that she said, Andy, once they meet you and once you've talked to them, they never call you again because you've really taken care of everything with that tour. And that personal connection, it just it goes from being a transaction to being a relationship. And something that I'll never forget, and I'll have to give credit. The person who said this was Brian Chesky, who's the CEO of Airbnb. He said that there's one thing about hospitality, and hospitality is a heart-based business, and you cannot digitize the heart. You can't pixelize or digitize the heart. And so I think that that's something to always keep in mind. There's a shift when somebody actually meets someone, and I also think that the reality is they're even going to treat the place better. And I think that's why people maybe still do look for hosted places where they rent a room. I don't think it's always just simply to save money. Let me tell you a quick story as a guest. I love this. I went to Sedona. I love Sedona, everything about it, the mountain biking. So I found this place that had the best view in town, and I say that because it wasn't cheap at all. It was like $300 a night for a room. The owner, why did I? Yeah, I love the view. I met the owner. She was Indian, and we had great conversations about yoga because I love yoga and I teach yoga, and it's an important part of my life. So when I told her about it, she was like, "Oh, well, you need to come with me to the top level, and I need you to do yoga, and I'm going to take pictures of it to put in my Airbnb," which was hysterical because there was a crazy wind, and I'm trying to do these balancing poses with a 30-mile-an-hour wind. So it was a little bit insane. But there was something else really, really sweet about two things about the experience in that. One was that I told her I wanted to hike the North Fork Trail, or I forget what it's called, about, I don't know, an hour north in the mountains from Sedona. And she looked at me and said, Andy, well, can you take my dog? And I'm like, well, yeah, I love dogs. Sure. Why not? And I said, well, do you have a leash? She said, oh, you don't need a leash. The dog goes with you. And so I took the dog, and the dog was sweet, big dog, great dog, very, very nice. But I get there and I'm about to begin my walk, and I see this obnoxious red sign that says, dogs must be leashed, $5,000 fine. And I'm like, I have a dilemma here. Do I do I go back? Do I, and then so I said, no, I'm here to do a hike and I'll just risk it. And so I spent my whole hike. Every time I saw someone, I would just launch myself and hug the dog. you know, I mean, you don't get this kind of experience in a hotel. I mean, so this
No, no,
is wild,
you'd never.
right?
And look, but you remember this, and you're telling the story now, right?
I'm telling the story. These are memorable experiences that you just every time you remember them, it puts a smile and yeah.
I love that you shared that, and I totally agree. You would never get that kind of experience in a hotel. I think that's the beauty of short-term rentals, and I think just to conclude on that high is it's why the hospitality piece is so important and the passion piece is so important, and I really do hope that more people come into this industry with that attitude rather than looking at it as just a business opportunity, because it could be both. And I think that's what will continue to help the industry grow and guests to have better and better experiences. Um, but thank you, Andy, so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed our conversation so much. I could chat with you ages. You've got some incredible stories to tell. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much, Nihal. I enjoyed being here, and you made me bring back really, really good memories. I hope we get the chance to host you. I don't know if you'll tell and your viewers, in case they want to know who we are. We're Newman Hospitality. You can find us online, and you can visit our homes. And yeah, hope we can host you.
I will absolutely be including the links to your website and social media in the show notes and in all our promotion. I've been poking around your website, looking at the properties. They are gorgeous. If I'm ever in that on that side of the world, I would definitely be giving you a visit, and I encourage anyone listening to have a look. Thanks again, Andy, so much. It's really been great chatting with you.
Thank you, Nihal.